that you get to know business management as people and understand their motivations, their kind of their wider perspective on the world, which helps you when you're doing the audit, just to put yourself in their shoes.
So for me, stakeholder management really gives you that insight to the business, and often we get stuck in our own little worlds, and you get this appreciation for just how much people have to do, how much they have to think about, and it's not always present when you do the audit work. And I think that really expands your mind and gives you that opportunity to see what's really going on in the business.
Really meeting people, whether it's new folk or those with whom I've had a relationship for quite a while. One-to-one conversations often allow more frank discussion than is possible in such as a committee setting. Generally, one of the reasons why I like audit is you get such a good view of the bank, and between audits and leadership team cascades, they're well supported then by the one-to-ones where you can get much more in-depth discussion on specific areas.
I like talking to different people across the business, like finding out what they do and what their objectives are, and what the challenges are. It gives a bit of a mechanism to speak to people outside the land and audit reports for them, because people tend to get a bit defensive. So I like build up a bit of a rapport and understand about how they tick, what level of detail that they like, and what type of person that they are. And it also gives them a bit of an opportunity to find out a bit more about you.
Go. In terms of strengths, probably I think I'm reasonably personable. I've got a lot of experience in the bank and financial services generally, and quite a long memory, which means it can often inform conversations. For example, just on the recent credit cards audit, we were discussing a potential control gap in relation to change control. I referenced an event from about 2015, and the stakeholder who was also around at the time of that event, as he recalled it as well, that the penny dropped on why the point we were raising just now was still absolutely valid. In terms of weakness, probably sometimes I can talk too much and get into too much detail. Well aware of it, but a very hard thing to stop.
Biggest strength I think is generally how I come across. I think I come across quite well personality wise and generally get on with people, and I think that really helps when you're trying to build that relationship. Biggest weakness, probably actually, I'm quite a shy person, and I find that initial trying to build up a relationship with people quite a struggle. So it's great once you've got that relationship and once you start talking to people and you know them, but that initial 2 or 3 meetings when you're trying to get through that barrier, I find quite challenging.
So for me, everybody that knows me knows that I'm definitely a proponent of radical candor, but that's probably both a strength and a weakness. There's time and a place for how you approach different people, and so I am very direct, and I think that works for a lot of stakeholders, but I definitely need to pull back sometimes and make sure that I'm working to different people's personalities.
Biggest strength, I think I'm pretty good at working out how people like to be communicated with, and like adjusting style and approach if needed with them. I suppose the weakness is if you're meeting someone new for the first time, you can get a bit nervous because you don't know what they're like. They could be nasty, they could be nice, you never know.
Go. I think effective relationships are based on trust and reliability. It might sound simple, but it's important to honour any commitments that you give in the meeting by making sure you follow up on them afterwards. It's also good to remember what people have previously told you about, say their work, their family, their interests, etc., and just to introduce some of those elements to subsequent conversations. It's not the kind of thing that you can fake, but it's good for maintaining a rapport when you take a genuine interest in people and their lives.
So I think it's really important that you meet them regularly, and that's the key thing, is that you get in front of them and you become part of their network. But also for me, I think it's actually trying to get beneath the surface of just what they do, what their role is, and trying to find out something about them as a person, and giving something about yourself as well, because when they see you as an individual and how you interact, that helps.
The key thing with a difficult message is, one, that you keep an open mind that you don't necessarily have the right answer, the truth. There's still more to the story sometimes. So be open when you go into that conversation, but you should also have a lot of the facts on your side. So before you go in for a difficult message, make sure you understand what the issues are. You've done as much of the research as possible so that you can support the position, but while remaining open-minded to what the stakeholder has to say.
Biggest strength, I think I'm pretty good at working out how people like to be communicated with and like adjusting style and approach if needed with them. I suppose the weakness is if you're meeting someone new for the first time, you can get a bit nervous because you don't know what they're like. They could be nasty, they could be nice, you never know.
I think once you've developed a relationship with an individual, you learn what approach works with them. For example, do they like a little bit of small talk or getting straight to the point? Do they prefer a structured agenda or less formal conversation? If I meet somebody for the first time, I will try and make it more structured. But regardless of the approach, whether it's formal or structured, you need to prepare properly. Speak to other colleagues within the audit team to see if there's any relevant recent audit work that might be worth sharing. We know that the sharing good practice is something that stakeholders value because they told us that in the annual effectiveness survey last year, and that's why the session at team meetings on reports issued in the last week is really important, to listen to that and to understand what you might take into your stakeholder contacts.
I think over time, if you're meeting people regularly enough, you get a general feel for what the type of person is. Like some of them like detail, some of them just like the bullet points. They want to understand different types and different levels of information, and I suppose over time you'll sort of get an indication of that through various conversations or meetings that you're in, or how they interact with other people, so you could plan your approach in accordingly. It's sometimes even just best knowing how that individual wants to be communicated with. If they want a phone call, if they rather talk face to face, whether they want a Teams message or an email, just sort of like sometimes helps as well.
Well, I suppose the first thing I do is consider whether or not my way of thinking is actually right in the first place. I think the use of sprint reviews during audits now means that we're sharing possible issues as they emerge during the audit. That just reinforces the principle of no surprises, whilst also giving the auditee opportunity throughout the audit to provide additional information as they see fit, so that by the time we discuss issues formally, we'll have been through lots of internal review, they'll have been trailed with the stakeholder, we'll be well prepared for discussion, so disagreements should happen less often. But certainly if there is we don't agree with you, I'll generally explain what we did, why we think what we think, why we believe it matters, but recognise you can only push it so far in a meeting. If you reach an impasse, you just say, send us additional information, we'll go away and we'll think about it, and we'll get back to you, because we're not always right.
So when stakeholders disagree with you, I think for me it's always important to try and put yourself in their shoes, to try and understand their perspective and to demonstrate that you understand their perspective. So what I would always do is, if I think that there's an issue that they are going to push back on, they're going to challenge, is look at it beforehand and understand where I think that challenge will come from, and prepare responses almost in advance. Because I think that does two things. A, it helps you prepare for the meeting, but also it demonstrates to your stakeholder that you've thought about their perspective and you're not just gung-ho, this is my opinion and I'm going for it.
Go away. So internal audit's in a unique position where we're not restricted to you work in this area, you work in that area. We get to see quite a lot, and as a team we're very good about sharing information, I think. So for me, I hope I bring value to my stakeholders by connecting dots. So I like to go from one meeting to the next meeting and say, this happened here, have you thought about how that might have an implication on this other thing that may not seem immediately connected?
I don't necessarily think that those two things are mutually exclusive, because I think quite often stakeholders want to get the audit completed quite quickly. But yeah, again, it's that whole thing about understanding their perspective and putting forward your perspective. I think it's very important to be open and honest with your stakeholders and telling them why you're doing things. If you've got a deadline, you tell them you've got a deadline, and you tell them why it's important that you do things by a date, and it's trying to bring a bit of yourself to that conversation rather than just this sort of blank face of audit.
So I'd firstly hope that, if it's an audit report, then the stakeholders been through the sprint review process. They should know what all the issues are. There shouldn't be any surprises when it gets to like the time of actual reporting. A lot of good communication is good, and if you know them, you'll know how frequently they want to be kept in the loop, or if they're happy to just delegate to their the people that report into them. Most of the time, if there's challenges in delivery, it just tends to be people that are just busy, or it's like audit maybe doesn't have enough of a priority, or they don't have enough resources to pick things up. And in situations like that, you just actually have to have a discussion with them to see what the problems are, what the challenges are, and just listen to what concerns they've got to see if there's anything you could do to adjust your approach or what you're looking for to help them. But if you do think you're completely getting not listened to or completely ignored, people not responding, then I'd probably go and drop a message to the line manager or someone else that may have a bit of an input into how they prioritise their work around it. Usually if you just take it up and escalate it, their manager will help reset priorities if need be, or at least know when there's other challenges.
So at this point in my career, the biggest challenge is really being properly prepared for stakeholder meetings. I think particularly for the manager and below group, you have a lot of other things that are on your plate that aren't necessarily focused on stakeholder and the high level pieces of the organization. And so I found myself sometimes stumbling into a meeting. I can sort of wing it based on the information that I have, but I definitely need to commit to being more prepared, making sure that I'm bringing value to the stakeholder because their time is very valuable.
Probably remote working. Nothing really beats the face-to-face communications, in particular the ability to just wander over to someone's desk when the need arises, or even just bump into them in the office and have a quick catch-up. I think with the homework and there's less opportunity for the informal chats, and even in homework and it's harder to maintain the regular formal catch-ups. So that's probably the biggest miss from compared to sort of pre-pandemic.